my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and wide. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine.
Hi, this is Marjohn Love, and this is Marjohn's Musings. I had quite an interesting week. I went out to Ohio and I purchased a little female dog. Her name is Cookie Monster. She has a very pretty face, and the breeder kept her in hopes that she would be a breeding dog. And over time, it turned out that she wasn't. Papillon females are supposed to be 6 pounds, and this one doesn't quite make 5. So I set up to go to Ohio to get this dog because there are no Papillon breeders here in Massachusetts. There are 2 in New Hampshire, but although I contacted them both, they wound up selling their puppies to other people. And the night before I left on my trip, which I postponed because my girlfriend Lori's daughter was going to go visit her grandma in Ohio, and we were going to fly in to the Cleveland airport. So we decided instead of the 2 of us flying different days, we'd fly there together, which made my trip a whole lot more fun because it was fun to have Leap with me. The night before we were going to take off, on February 21st, I get an email from the company petfinder.com that my breeder uses to announce her new puppies. And there was this cutie bug. His name is Dax. He was only 10 weeks old. So I asked my husband, I'm like, he had approved the trip enough that he paid for my hotel room in Cleveland, but I didn't know if he was quite ready to get back up to 2 dogs. He said, well, you go look at him, and if you fall in love with him, you can take him home. So I get to the Cleveland airport through a rather strange chain of events. Because Leap and I both printed off our boarding passes on our home printers, I thought we'd go through TSA, through security together. So we show the agent our boarding passes, and he separates us. And he puts her in one line to one room and me in another line to another area. And I guess I had a preferred instant boarding or something, and she did not. So I go through security, and I have this little carrier has my clean undies and fresh socks and clean shirt, because I didn't want to travel heavy. I was traveling alone on the way back, carrying 1 or 2 dogs. I didn't know at that point which. And you know, you're going through the magnetic thing, and it beeps, and I get pulled aside. And they call out for a female staff person. And there isn't one on duty, at least not near enough to them to hear the page. I'm standing there a good 12 minutes before I start to get aggravated. And the reason I'm getting aggravated is Leap isn't a little girl, but she's a young teenager, and I told her mother I would take care of her, and here we're separated already. We haven't even made it through security yet. So they put me in the tube, you know, that x-rays you. And gongs and bells went off. And a woman had to be called over from the other side to feel my braids. to make sure I hadn't hidden contraband or weapons in my braids. I've shared with you before that I'm part Native American. A very small part, but I'm part Native American. So I've been following the water protection efforts at Standing Rock. And one of the young women there was being interviewed, and she asks in a bit of heat, why does my protecting water on my land make me a terrorist? It's a very valid question. I think part of what happened with the increasing tension and the beginnings of violence is that the people who are guarding the Native American people and their supporters are military. If you set military who, if they disobey orders or if they attempt to leave, are called deserters and can be shot, if you set military to guard civilians who have the right in our country to civil disobedience, that does not mean that there won't be consequences. There's consequences to every action, but civil disobedience has legal and social consequences. So if you stand up to big oil, transporting dirty oil from shale beds in Canada through your water-bearing land, the only fresh water for miles, you come in conflict with law. Much law is written by the wealthy for the wealthy. That was not the intent of the founding fathers. That's why there was a Senate and a House. The House was supposed to represent the common people, and the Senate was supposed to represent landowners and the gentry, the educated, the upper classes. The Electoral College was a stopgap measure against mob rule. I've been watching very carefully that marijuana was legalized in quite a few states recently. I'm very ambivalent about it. There are times when people use marijuana to decrease spasticity, it's a muscle relaxant, to increase heart rate, it's a cardiac stimulant, to increase appetite. People who ingest THC, the active component in marijuana, have increased appetite. Anybody who's ever smoked a joint will tell you they get dry mouth and something that the hippies used to call the munchies. There's a reason for that. THC stimulates the frontal lobes and a great deal of the cortex. So when you smoke pot, your brain goes into a higher gear than normal, but your body relaxes. When I was young enough that my dad thought this picture looked like me. This calendar is a 1974 calendar. 2 years, well, no, I guess, yeah, 2 years prior to that, so 1972-73 fall winter, I discovered pot in college. And in those days, we rolled our own. We used papers, easy widers. And we had little wooden or stone pipes. And because you didn't want to breathe in the ash and the little bits of pot, we would buy little copper screens to screen the marijuana so that it didn't get caught in your throat, little ashes and little detritus. I had, at that time, wanted marijuana to become legalized. And in those days, I smoked Marlboros. My husband lost both of his parents to lung cancer, and he told me he would not marry me unless I promised him that I would refrain from smoking. Now, I had managed to quit smoking, but it took me 13 tries. Once I quit for an entire year. I went out with my girlfriend Danny for her birthday. They found out it was Danny's birthday. People started buying us drinks at the bar. We got up, we danced, we had a wonderful time, and I woke up in the morning, stuck my hand in my purse, and had a Marlboro in my mouth lit before I realized what I was doing. An entire year of not smoking went down the drain. I had to quit all over again. It wasn't any easier. So this cool comes from my son. My dad smoked. He had to have bypass surgery for his heart and a stent put in. My mother smoked. She died at 45. And like I told you, both of Kevin's parents died of lung cancer. So it distresses me that my son smokes. My old Marie Blanche, that I've talked to you about before, smoked. She smoked Gauloise. She has a beautiful cigarette case. And her husband, Romulo, also had a cigarette case. And she had a long, tapered cigarette holder to put the Gauloise in so that it would cool the smoke and take away some of the tar before it entered her lungs. I bought this beautiful little thing. It's a joint holder. I got it from the Boston Smoke Shop. And just like back in the day when I would put 50 cents in a machine and get a pack of Cools that was smaller than this, or a pack of Marlboros, which were shorter than these, I was in culture shock. This one pack of Marlboros cost me the price of an entire carton when I was smoking. And I bought something I'd never owned. I bought a bong. I have a friend who has migraines, and after the show, I'm going to give this as a gift to my friend. So I bought a really nice one. He smokes pot to make the pain in his head stop. His migraines are so severe that he's had surgery, neurosurgery. The idea of the bong is that you fill this bottom part with water. You put your pot in the bowl, and then you inhale from here, and these vaporizers take the smoke through water, cool it, clean it, and then you inhale the smoke, and you get rid of some of the junk. There are still known carcinogens that come through pot smoke, just like they do through cigarette smoke. It's kind of strange, but when I smoked marijuana in college, prior to discovering it, I was on a dean's scholarship with a 3.95 average. That means all my grades were A's except for one A minus. I was an uptight student, skinny, nervous, foot going all the time. And a friend of mine said, you know, you should try pot. And I did. And I enjoyed it. I liked it. It was like a nice high. I was afraid to ingest a lot of alcohol. This is platinum vodka, 7 times distilled. I had alcoholics in my family, notably my grandfather. He was what was known as a dry drunk. He'd sober up periods of time that could be years, and then he'd quote unquote fall off the wagon. When Grandpa Jimmy fell off the wagon, people got hurt. He had a savage temper. And one of the things that alcohol does is it increases your libido and it lowers your threshold for aggravation so that you get angry quicker. So I brought in this bottle of platinum vodka today to talk about something with pot that concerns me. This is a lovely European vodka glass. Now, most of us around here know what Sam Adams is, and a couple of years ago they came out with a Sam Adams The Perfect Glass. Take pride in your beer. And since my husband drinks Sam Adams, I got some of these glasses. This is what you serve beer in. This is what you serve vodka in. Why the difference? Proof. Beer is a low-proof beverage, although some beers are stronger than others. This is Jack's Abbey Craft Lager, Black Lager, Smoke and Dagger. I told you, I like my beer the color of black coffee. My grandmother used to say, is it thick enough you can float an egg in it? I don't know if that one is. I've never tried putting a raw egg in my beer. That was a habit for farmers back in Ireland. They'd go to the pub in the morning and have an egg in their beer, stir that around and drink that and go out and work in the fields. Beer is a very high carbohydrate beverage. It can make you heavy. But the little vodka glass, you would have one. Many people who drink beer have 2 or 3. Over centuries, people learned how to hybridize plants. The original apple was related to what we now call crab apple, and it was crossed with rose hips. And it was smaller than this pink ball. But by breeding apple trees to apple trees and grafting and cross-pollinating, this is one of my husband's favorite kind of apples. It's a Granny Smith apple. It's tart. You can get apples this size and bigger at Market Basket, and this is not an unusual apple in any way. There are bins full of them. They bred apples to be either tart, like this one, or sweet, like Pink Ladies, Red Delicious, Golden Delicious apples. They're all bred to be sweet. Pot was crossbred to be stronger and more intoxicating. So just as this apple is very different from its original predecessor, natural pot that grew wild is less intoxicating than what is available now. That's an issue because when people are buying pot, especially prior to legalization, you didn't know what was in the bag. Was it someone's homegrown that was going to affect you like one beer? Or was it someone's super fantastic weed that was going to intoxicate you as much as vodka? For those of you who know this culture, you'll know why I have a mirror and a $20 bill. And I have a vial of white powder. Most people, when they get white powder, they get this much or less. This much white powder costs a fortune. For the purposes of this show, I brought in Splenda. And I was going to do the routine, with the razor blade. I was going to show a little spoon. I was going to roll the $20 bill. Anybody interested in that, you can see it on movies. I thought, I think I'll skip that part. I don't want to encourage anyone who's unaware to be curious to become aware. But my point is, the white powders, which are illegal, you don't know what you're buying. You could be buying beer strength, or you could be buying vodka strength. And if you think you're buying beer and ingest through snorting or smoking or shooting the stronger stuff by mistake, you die. You overdose. I don't know anyone who's ever overdosed from marijuana. I think the only reason marijuana was a gateway drug is that it was illegal. Because it was illegal, in order to get it, you had to get it from a dealer or grow your own, that you had to get the seeds from someone. I was at a retirement party for a friend of mine, and her nephew, who lives in Oregon, talked about the economic boom in the state of Oregon for growers and purveyors of marijuana. They've been legal for a couple of years there. And that there's a great deal of tax revenue. The growers pay the revenue, the sellers pay the revenue, the buyers pay a sales tax. There's a great deal of state revenue. But just because something's legal doesn't make it good for you. I gave up smoking cigarettes in 1980. And when I go and have a respiratory test for my lung condition, I'm still only 84% the tidal volumes and lung capacity of a normal woman my age. Now, I worked locked inpatient mental health when we smoked on the job. I'd go through 2 packs of these a day. So I wasn't like a social smoker. And I wasn't a religious smoker. In Native American cultural heritage, tobacco is like marijuana to the Rastafarians. It's considered a sort of a sacrament. The Rastafarians fire up a bowl, pass it around, and everybody gets calm and quiet and they meditate. They also use music to enliven them, help them with manual labor, and to inspire them. I've told you before, I sing in my choir at church. I find it interesting. I listen to songs that I used to listen to when I smoked pot. I'm very nostalgic about them. But stopping smoking pot and being able to clean myself up and go back to Boston University, finish my required courses, and graduate, that took doing on my part. It wasn't easy to give up pot, and I'd only been smoking it for, 5-6 months. What was very, very telling for me, and I don't know that this applies to everyone, but it did apply to me, is that I tested for Mensa. And I came out with an IQ of 256. Later on, after I smoked pot, I was sent an invitation by people at MIT who had a group that was the top 2% of Mensa. And my initial test scores, I would have qualified easily. But when I went in and took the test to get into that group, I only scored 163. That's nearly a 90-point drop in IQ. What might I have accomplished in my life if I had not damaged myself through drinking and smoking? And if you smoke, your children are more likely to smoke. And even if you quit, you have that reference. I don't know, I think it's much more complex than whether something's legal or not. You all know I go to Market Basket to buy my groceries. I also go to Common Crow. I'm wearing one of their t-shirts today with the black feather. I thought it went along with my message about standing up with Standing Rock. But I met a woman in Market Basket who used to work at Common Crow. I'd known her for years. She worked there for 9 years, and she was laid off. The store's still open. A lot of young, new faces. Bothered me that because you perform well and you get a raise, and you perform well and you get a raise, and you perform well and you get a raise, that at some point, in this woman's case 9 years, it was advantageous for the owner of the store to hire a brand new person with no experience because their salaries were lower. Made me sad. Made me think, how often will I shop there? But anyway, back to Market Basket. So I go to Market Basket, and this is my drug of choice these days. Domino sugar. Now, I have type 2 diabetes. And so there are sugar substitutes, Sweet and Low, Equal, Splenda. My doctor told me, don't do that. Don't use artificial sweeteners. They're not good for you, and they make you think of ingesting sweet things, and so it's harder for you to give up sugar. So this morning, I went to make myself a cup of tea. I have this lovely Cape Ann television mug. I made a cup of tea. And out by the coffee machine are Dunkin' Donuts packets. A yellow one, a blue one, and a pink one. I read them, and they do match. The pink has the same, and the blue has the same, and the yellow has the same. But Dunkin's is a big company, and they're under watchful eye a lot. But there's not Sweet and Low in the pink packet, and there's not Equal in the blue packet, and there's not Splenda in the yellow packet. It's sort of generic. You know, you go to the pharmacy and the pharmacist says your insurance will only pay for the generic drug. I don't know any of you who've ever bought perfume and the mock perfume and you put them together and the real perfume smells way better than the cheap one. I look at these things and I go, oh my goodness. But anyway, this drug kills just as much as cigarettes, maybe more so. There are hundreds of thousands of people in the United States who legally purchased sugar who are now diabetic like me. Diabetes can make you go blind. It affects your nerves. You can wind up with your feet amputated. But sugar is legal. Not only is it legal, it's in all sorts of processed foods. It's even in powdered baby formula. But it's not always called sucrose. Sometimes it's called dextrose or maltodextrin. So I head out to Ohio. I'm going to get Cookie Monster. And I am going to get Dax. I find out because I saw him and I thought, oh my goodness, he was the cutest baby dog I had seen in years. And I went out and I got them. And you've seen my iPhone. I listen to audiobooks when I'm in a loud, crazy environment and I want to be calm and quiet. I don't smoke pot for that these days. I listen to soothing music or I listen to audiobooks. So when I come into the Cleveland airport to come home, and I show my passport and I go through security and I have to go through inspection and the dogs need special health certificates. So I go early. I go way early because I have no idea how long this is going to take. I made the day of some of those TSA ladies. I don't think they get many puppies. They were thrilled and they were snuggling the puppies. And I had to put the carrier through the x-ray machine and carry the dogs through the x-ray machine. I'm like, okay. And so I have these two dogs and I come out and the TSA women are like snugging the puppies. And it was actually a sweet moment. But they sent me to gate B6. I'm sitting there, I'm listening to my audiobook, and the plane before me is boarding. Now, I asked the gate agent, am I where I need to be? She said, yeah, your flight is right after this one. So I'm relaxing. I have 2 hours to cool my heels, waiting for my flight after I've been through all the security and everything. they had a gate change. They announced the gate change, one of the hundreds and hundreds of announcements that I tuned out because it didn't apply to me, did it? And then I look at the clock and I think, why aren't they boarding? Is the flight delayed? I get up and look. The gate where I am, where all the people who I thought were on my plane have come one, two at a time, joined me. They're all headed to Chicago. I go running through the airport with the dogs. And I wind up with this lady, and my plane is at her station out on the tarmac, and she won't let me on. Oh my God. I actually burst into tears because in that little carrier was a female dog, full grown. Now she's only 5 pounds, but she's about this big, and a puppy. I had already had them in the carrier for 2.5 hours, and now it was going to be how much longer? And the only way I could get to Boston is to go through Atlanta. She found me a handicapped accessible bathroom. I put pee pads down, I put food down, I put water down. The puppies got to scoot around a bit and stretch out. We cleaned the carrier, got it all set up, and then I go to Atlanta. And she was sweet enough that she put me in a 2-seater by myself so that I could kind of stretch out and relax. But to make the connection, if everything worked perfectly, I had about 50 minutes to be Terminal B to Terminal A in Atlanta, Georgia. And she says, I'm going to set you up with a wheelchair because I have a heart condition. And she didn't want me to try to run the distance because you have to go up and down stairs and up and down escalators and take a tram in between these two places. So we get into Atlanta. There are 4 handicapped people for that flight. One very slender woman who looked like she might have multiple sclerosis or a cerebral palsy type of motion, and she was quite handicapped. And then there were 2 other people who were older, like me, and heavy-set. And here's these 2 young, slender black men trying to cope with 4 handicapped people. I'm sitting there thinking of my Native American friends trying to protect the water, when the young black man hands me off 240-pound me to a 110-pound black woman who had to push me through the entire airport. I felt awful. And yet, she and I had a little discussion. I told her, my flight time. And she's like, don't worry, ma'am, I'll get you there. And she did. She scooted me through, excuse me, and got people to move out of her way. And she got me right up to the hatch of the plane, got me through special boarding, and got me onto the plane. And I made my flight. And Kevin picked us up at the airport. And Cookie and Dax and I made it home at 10 p.m., which we would have been home closer to like 7:30 if I had made my flight, if I hadn't had my earbuds in listening to my iPhone. And I guess I'm harping on that a little bit because in this day and age, you can isolate yourself so that you are involved with your small groups of friends, your social circle, and you're drinking or not drinking, smoking or not smoking, having pot or not having pot. And you think that what you are doing is normal. On Sunday, Reverend Derek von Goulden welcomed everyone to church by saying, "Welcome to this beautiful spring day in February." It was thought-provoking and quiet and subtle. He didn't yell and scream about global warming or whether it was true or not. He just pointed out that we were walking around in shirt sleeves in 70-degree weather in February. Now, Massachusetts weather has always been volatile. I can remember in BU back in 1973, the expression, "If you don't like the weather, wait a minute." My neighbor and friend, Sam, was walking around and he says to my husband, "Hey, you don't like the weather? Wait a minute." But it was a little disturbing that my crocuses and my tulips and my daffodils are budding and coming up, and we're very likely to have another snow. What that would mean for the hardy plants is not too much, but if it's food crops and delicate plants, if they bud and then freeze, you don't get the crop that year. When we were in Geneva, this would be, oh my goodness, almost 25 years ago, there was a warm snap and people in Switzerland and in France were disturbed because they sell a lot of wine. They have vineyards and they sell wine, and the vineyards blossomed and then snow, and then none of those flowers would produce buds. None of them would become grapes. They flowered prematurely, they weren't pollinated properly, they froze, and there would be no fruit. This thing with the global warming is of concern. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the power of packaging. I drink pomegranate juice. I tend to look for this particular bottle, and I drink it in a beautiful glass, a water glass. But this bottle has a feminine shape. It was designed to attract women. Has a heart and this female shape. I was at the Boston Smoke Shop on Washington Street in Gloucester. It's where I purchased that hookah. And I've always loved glass. My kid sister Polly had a glass animal collection. When about, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, they figured out how to laser bubbles into glass. I bought several of these paperweights. This one is the sun in the sky over a sailboat with seagulls and a lighthouse. So when I was in the Boston Smoke Shop on Washington Avenue, I was looking, they have so many pipes. I mean, they had pipes from $20 to like $500. This wasn't a bargain, but it wasn't $500 either. But I'm looking in the case where they had little pipes, sort of like the little joint holder. I was looking at small things to bring on the show, and I found this dragon. He's gorgeous. He's cobalt blue, and he's a little wall-eyed. I can remember when I smoked pot, I was a little wall-eyed. You know, we'd trip over our own feet and giggle at ourselves, but he's actually a pipe. You turn him upside down, you fill the little bowl, and you put your finger on the belly button hole and inhale and then give yourself a shot of pot. I was like, wow. I went ahead and bought him for myself because he's got these kind of buggy eyes to remind me that even though pot is becoming legal, it had consequences. So I asked our minister, Minister Derek, what was the United Church of Christ's policy about marijuana? He said, I don't think they have an official policy. Why don't you go on the UCC website, and you can look up. And I looked and I did not find a policy on pot. What I do know is that our church hosts AA a couple of times a week. So I know that our community of faith is aware that certain things can become addictive. I don't think we host Narcotics Anonymous, but I know we do host several meetings for Alcoholics Anonymous. So I thought, well, I belong to two faith traditions, and I checked, what do the Tibetan Buddhists believe about that? And I couldn't find anything that talked about marijuana specifically. What I do know is that they're anti-alcohol because alcohol can lead to temper outbursts like my grandfather used to have. But that this is a little portable incense that would have sand in the bottom, and you would burn incense and offer incense. So I know the Tibetans do use smoke for their religious ceremonies. And some of the incenses kind of give you a little lift, a little sense of calm or maybe euphoria a little bit. I don't know, it was very interesting to me. So I hadn't been going to church. Last couple of weeks, been real busy. And 2 weeks ago, I went by myself. Kevin's been working 15-hour days. He worked 28 days straight with 1 day off. And I didn't want to drag him out of bed on Sunday morning. So I went by myself. This little piece was written by Stephen Charleston. I see you. I thought it might help for you to know that. I see you over there working away at your life. I can't see everything, of course. I don't know all the details. But I see enough to know that you are coping, like me, doing the best you can, creating as much good as you can. And I see the impact you are having. There is light in your corner of the world, a sense of life and joy, a clear image of family in the making, a visible affirmation of love growing all around you. I can see all of that, and I know it doesn't happen by accident. I see how much you have helped, how much you have given, how much you have done. I see you. I thought it might help for you to know that. And then that week, the offertory prayer was, God, use these gifts to do wondrous acts of justice and compassion in your name. Where people are aging in isolation, growing up in violence, or suffering in silence, may our United Church of Christ have the courage to be a witness to a more excellent way. Through these gifts, Enable us to be your justice, kindness, and humility in the world, where your realm is made known in love. And so I bought my husband an apron because sometimes Kevin will serve coffee and goodies, and I make deviled eggs, and we do fresh veggies with dip for coffee hour. A lot of times for coffee hour, there's sweets and treats, but sometimes not everybody should be tempted to eat sugar. Even if the brownies are delicious, maybe certain people shouldn't be eating the brownies. And Reverend Derek does an interesting thing. He has us do a corporate confession. Then sometimes he confesses to us things he's done during the week that he was not exceptionally proud of himself about doing. The Buddhists also believe in confession. They say if you do a wrong deed, you need to say that to at least one person. Well, my wrong deed is typically temper. I get in the wheel of my car and I don't know what it is, but I can't get through 5 corners without somebody cutting me off or being rude or tailgating me or something. And I've tried to be a Buddhist since the 1970s. It's like hard for me some days to look at myself in the mirror and go, you still have a nasty temper. So I put a little Buddha on my car keys, not because the Buddha's magic, but to remind me to be compassionate toward other drivers. Maybe they're late for work. Maybe they're like our Lisa Smith here at Cape Ann Television, and they have a child that they need to pick up so the child isn't standing alone out at the school. Anyway, after all my angst and having my braids felt in the security, I came out and I ran over to the other TSA and I said, "Did you see a red-haired girl?" And they peeked all in their lines. And there she was, sitting on the bench, finest kind. She was fine. I don't know. Sometimes people worry about others when there's no need because they're self-sufficient. If you're able to have 1 or 2 beers in a week with friends at a social gathering, God love you and enjoy the beer. If you have a tendency that you need the harder stuff and you need it often and you drink alone, maybe look at that. And when they start selling pot as commercially prepared cigarettes, don't toke up and drive a vehicle. If you are driving an automobile or an SUV or a small truck, you're driving between 1,500 pounds and 4,000 or 5,000 pounds, 60, 70 miles an hour. If you have an accident, you could kill someone. One of the people that convinced me to give up pot and never go back 35, 40 years ago, saw our house driving the car and relaxed behind the wheel and fell asleep, and his car damaged 11 cars all the way until it stopped at the front of our house. We had to move. And that young man didn't just roll doobies. He also introduced our commune to hashish and ganja. Fortunately, we never got to the powders. Use your best judgment. This is Marjohn Love. This has been Marjohn's Musings. We'll see you next time.